Hi everyone, number one Marmaduke fan here, and this is a bit of a bittersweet moment because I think this is going to be the last lo-fi iPhone comic book review I do on this channel, but do not despair, this is not the last of Marmaduke fans' tangent-heavy, casual comic book and manga reviews. So this week I've created a new channel which is called Number One Marmaduke Fan Uncut. And the reason for that, if you are one of my Deltarune subscribers, you may be aware of this, is since covering the game Deltarune, this channel's just exploded, and I can't believe it. I honestly, when I made that first Deltarune vid, I thought it would be nice if I got 1,000 views on one of these videos, and maybe like 10 subs, right? That's what my expectations were when I started making Deltarune content, and now I am approaching 5,000 subscribers, mostly people who found me through that content, which means a lot of you are learning about my channel. You're kind of interested in what I do. And the weird thing about this channel is this started about a year ago, a little over a year ago, when I read a Legend of Zelda manga, and I just got sad because I really was moved by the story. I thought it was wonderful, but I kind of realized that the manga was the type of thing that my teachers and my classmates would have hated and would have wanted to destroy or pick apart until there was nothing left. And so I sort of stumbling over my words, started shooting videos on my iPhone, just about every day for a year, and that grew into the Number One Marmaduke Fan Show. And I've had some really loyal subs for that first year who were just really interested to hear what I had to say about comics. I started inviting guests on who were comic book artists and comic book writers to talk about their work, and it's really, really important to me that I keep doing that on YouTube. Now, though, that I've got a whole bunch of new subscribers, I want to do what I've learned from Jellopocalypse and Lost.jpg from Control-Alt-Delete, which is don't have a lot of fun, silly content, and then suddenly out of the blue drop some like really hot, spicy, controversial opinion out of nowhere. So if I'm gonna do video game content and I'm gonna do fun pop culture content, then I feel like that's kind of a different thing than me talking about, I don't know, like some of the most important and difficult questions that, anybody would ever face, right? And then trying to bring that up in the context of the arts, like what is right for an artist to do, which artists are evil and problematic, that kind of stuff. Because that stuff can get controversial, I think it'll be two channels. And the reason I like having two channels is it's simple. Like when I look back on my channel, maybe there are like 4 or 5 different types of videos that I do, and how many channels are you gonna be able to keep up with or organize? So I think it's just two: Number One Marmaduke Fan and Number One Marmaduke Fan Uncut. So this video you see is gonna go on both. This will be the first video on Number One Marmaduke Fan Uncut and the last lo-fi comic book review on Number One Marmaduke Fan. My plan for Number One Marmaduke Fan is it's just going to be a little bit more polished and a little bit more fun. So more me talking about things I love and celebrating things I love and just enjoying, the joy of being part of these fandoms and enjoying these parts of pop culture. And Number One Marmaduke Fan Uncut is going to have, it's pretty much going to be, if you followed Number One Marmaduke Fan for the first year of its existence, Number One Marmaduke Fan Uncut is going to be that. One thing that my Deltarune fans should note is I'm going to keep having comic book live streams on Number One Marmaduke Fan. The reason for that is it's always been important for me to use the channel I have to talk to artists and writers about their craft, and especially if they're on their own and they're not part of the industry, to give them a chance to introduce them to new people. So if you like comics at all, if you like manga or anime or superheroes at all, or the Marvel movies at all, and you're one of the people who were interested in me because of Deltarune, by all means, go check out some of my live streams with comic book artists. Check out the projects they're working on, because I'm a big proponent of the arts and celebrating artists on this channel. So with that 5-minute tangent, let's do the perfect goodbye, I think, for a lo-fi comic book review would be these two, because these are two highest recommendations, which are very different from each other, but I recommend them for similar reasons. These are both examples of artists using a very particular style, which is unique, but fits beautifully with the tone of the story. I've read I've only read volume 1 of The Case Study of Vanitas by Jun Mochizuki. I've read about 5 volumes of Mushishi, and I'd give both of them a high recommendation. I'd give Mushishi a especially high recommendation because I've read and read and read it, and it just stays good. So let's take a peek. So Yuki Urushibara, the winner of the Kodansha Manga of the Year Award. I don't remember the title, but it was for the one about the girl who was blind. But I would describe Yuki Urushibara's style as almost like Auguste Rodin. And Auguste Rodin was this French sculptor, beautiful realist, but also really expressive. So he might sculpt, some tragic people and give them really big hands and really big feet, and they were kind of funny looking, but they were still, very emotional and powerful. That's the vibe I get from Yuki Urushibara. There are some like rough, sketched out, funky looking moments to it, but then there are also these really lush, detailed scenery, and he puts it all together. So I think one of the first things I marked is this is from his very first story about a young boy who, anytime he draws something, it comes to life, and this panel just creeped me out because it's very much an authentic feeling child's drawing that the artist is imitating. This actually isn't my favorite story, but every one of these stories is successful as a good, solid ghost story. And I think what makes a good, solid ghost story is not that it throws a bunch of blood and guts at you, but that it tells you something kind of haunting and deeply unsettling that you click with or connect with, maybe from your own childhood. And it maybe tells you something about the nature of life and death, but it leaves you with this vague unease. And what I love about Mushishi is they are all successful ghost stories. They all leave you with this sort of quiet sense of unease, around the campfire, and, the camp counselor who's got a really good storytelling voice is telling you about the man trapped in the old house. That's the feeling you get from these stories. But there's variety amongst them. So some of them, Ginkgo, who is like this young doctor who specializes in these sort of ghost-like primal life creatures called Mushi. It's sort of like they're a cross between ghosts and the very first forms of ancient life. And they cause diseases and all sorts of problems. Sometimes they can be beneficial. So a Mushishi is an expert in Mushi, and that's what Ginkgo is. I really love this story. Oh, what's the title? The Soft Horns. The Soft Horns and the one that comes a little later have a very similar vibe in that they'll have like a child who's attacked by Mushi, and most people don't understand, the nature of the disease or how to treat the disease, and there's like an ironic twist to it. Like, you think this is the way to deal with it, but you're actually making it worse. And it usually connects to something like isolation, themes of friendship, themes of death. This one about the father who keeps having dreams, the pillow path. The pillow path is about a father who keeps having dreams, and his dreams keep coming true. And so this is seen as a blessing. Now they can prepare for bad things and save lives. They can they know if like a good harvest is coming up. So it seems great, but he's warned not to. He's warned to take his medicine and not have the dreams. And so this gives him kind of a moral quandary. Should he not take his medicine and keep having these dreams? Oh, gosh, this image gets in your head so much. Yeah. I don't know. There's something deeply psychological about what Yuki Urushibara is doing, like using all the images of nature, I think, to symbolize, the complexity of, characters' thoughts. Like, I bet, I don't even know if this is conscious, but sort of like, even like the trees and the branches are sort of like synapses of the brain. Like, what's going on, man? What's going on? I don't understand. The one that won it's called a Kodansha Manga of the Year Award, was The Light in the Eyelids. And The Light in the Eyelids, similar to the Soft Horns, has a girl who's affected by this disease. She's gone blind and she can't be exposed to light. So the parents have the bright idea that, well, we'll lock her in a dark room, right? That way she doesn't have to see light and her eyes won't hurt. And spoiler alert, that's not the best way to deal with these primal evil darkness life beings, right? And so Ginkgo will always show up and he'll try to like diagnose the problem and help people. And Ginkgo, with each story, Ginkgo sometimes is sort of as like a secondary character almost, but then with each story you learn a little bit more about him. And it's clear that Ginkgo has some tragedy of his own in his background. He's dedicated his life to understanding kind of like almost like a mystical science. The setting, by the way, is kind of odd. And actually, what's funny about this is Yuki Urushibara changed his mind. Sometimes he imagined this story is taking place near the modern day, but later decided it would be kind of between the Tokugawa era and what the Romantic era. I forget all the formal Japanese names, but kind of like in this almost like loosely defined, like it almost could be any point in Japan's history, really, except for a few like minor inconsistencies that were retconned later where he's wearing modern jeans. So the history of it isn't that important. I think because these are good ghost stories, what's more important are the ghosts and the patients that Ginkgo helps, and it almost could take place at any point in history, really. These are such great, Oh, and he even does these cute little stories from his mom and dad, a story of not so long ago, number 2, where he tells ghost stories his mother and father would tell him. And what I like about this is it's clear that the artist has just been collecting this kind of stuff all his life. I've seen other manga artists do this. They'll tell like the little ghost stories that their mom and dad would tell them when they were a kid and they got creeped out by it. And sometimes they'll add that to their world as flavor. But Mushishi is the primal Japanese ghost story. It's just so... I'm not kidding. Like maybe the monkey's paw is one of the other like fantastic, iconic ghost stories I can think of. This is story after story after story of fantastic, iconic ghost story, hitting everything it needs to create that emotional impact. The Traveling Bog is another one where he shows off his ability to do like nature, and his people aren't super weebish. I mean, it's influenced by the manga style, but I think it's sort of like I said, I think there's a mix of Rodin and Western art in here, and really he sort of shifts and changes, I think, to make it work emotionally. So dark scenes, lots of rich blacks, ghostly, misty scenes, lots of soft grays. He adapts a lot, the loose, sketchy style, to work in different kinds of scenarios, and I don't think you can go wrong with this. What was I looking at this for? This is just an example of that, right? So I think I highlighted this because rich black, sketchy lines, beautiful rendering of trees, almost all soft gray, cartoony drawing of ginkgo, sort of careful contour line drawing of the plant life, hazy image of the girl as she's kind of becoming lost in the ghostly bog. Great stuff. Look at this. Look at this. A fantastic artist. Oh, this afterword. I want to read this. This is so dope. When I returned home from submitting this manga to a competition, I thought, that's the last competition I'm ever going to enter. I got very emotional over it. All the energy was drained out of me by it, and I went out looking for work. Then on the day before a job interview, at a point when I had completely forgotten the competition, they contacted me with the results. At the time, I remember thinking that reality is pretty acrobatic in the way it flips you. Soon after that, they decided to make the story a continuing series, but one's energy isn't revitalized that quickly. My editor was very patient and stayed by my side, or rather, is still staying by my side. The existence of Mushi must be a very troubling thing, but I love them. If I could get into the world of the story, I think I'd be very happy to sense these tiny creatures. And then he has some commentary on each of these, and it's great. I won't read all of that, but it's just such an inspiring story that, looking at the rough style, you can see how, a bunch of manga editors would have said, this doesn't look like Dragon Ball Z, make it look like Dragon Ball Z, right? And he would have had a hard time finding a niche, but once he found his niche, then it's the perfect style. It's the perfect style for this type of story. Fantastic. Oh, okay, I wanted to make sure I got this. Hinotama, that's what his dad's story is about. His dad's story was about like the ghostly lights that are kind of like the equivalent of Will-o'-the-Wisps in Japan, and they're called Hinotama. I love that. Little notes on things you might not know from the culture. So, excellent. Even if you've watched the Mushishi anime and enjoyed that, you gotta read the Mushishi manga. I've never seen an artist draw the way Yuki Urushibara does. So, highest recommendation. Oh, we're 13 minutes in. Okay. I'm going to review this more, so I'll be a little bit more brief with this in future volumes. So, Jun Mochizuki's The Case Study of Vanitas. Well, number one, it comes with a recommendation from Hiromu Arakawa, drawing yourself as a cow, as always. Hiromu Arakawa is the manga artist and writer of Full Metal Alchemist. So that is some high praise. She's just completely blown away in this little cute cartoon drawing, and she can't wait to read the rest of it. So I kind of look at Hiromu Arakawa as one of these like patron saints of drawing on planet Earth, and all of the thoughts I've read from her on her own drawing show she's a very thoughtful and exuberant person about her own work. So this is some high praise. If you're even vaguely familiar with Full Metal Alchemist, I think you'll enjoy the case study of Vanitas. So what I'll say about the case study of Vanitas is it kind of reminds me of Sherlock Holmes in a good way, where I think that if you copy Sherlock Holmes in a bad way, it's just sort of like you take Watson and Holmes, you copy and paste them and maybe add vampires or werewolves to it, and that's it. But I think that Jun Mochizuki has kind of captured the vibe of Sherlock Holmes and Watson while doing something that's hers with them and not just copy-pasting them. So this guy here, Dr. Vanitas, is kind of the Holmes of the relationship in that he's a very flawed character, almost kind of an antisocial character. Despite his extreme charm, he's still kind of a jerk. And Noah, this guy, is sort of a country bumpkin who's very handsome, very earnest and enthusiastic and very capable, but is kind of like he's forced into the city life and he's not used to city life yet. And so the Vanitas is a book and a person. The Vanitas is this legendary book which is said to have been created by the vampire born under the blue moon who wished to murder all vampires. And what I like about this vampire book is, you know, do you like vampires or not? What I like about it is I think vampires are kind of cool when they're sort of classy, and they're kind of dangerous, and they're part of something, you know, like, so the vampires in this world are part of an actual steampunk universe, which I didn't get at first. It just feels like a really rich, vibrant, you know, Victorian England, Victorian France era world. And one of the things about the art that I really like is it uses scariness appropriately. So I don't think it's ever worse than PG or PG-13 in terms of violence, but by using, you know, certain drawing techniques like lots of black and lots of sharp lines, some scenes will feel scarier than they actually are based on purely on how well they're drawn, right? Like this kind of stuff. It's unsettling, but it's not like, you know, traumatic or, you know, would give kids, it actually would give kids nightmares. It just wouldn't give kids nightmares by throwing a lot of blood and guts in their face. So this is a world where vampires are known to exist, and there was a war between humans and vampires. So they're kind of looked at as, hey, you don't murder anybody, we'll just like shuffle you out of here and pretend you weren't here, okay? So people know of them, but they just kind of like want to pretend they don't exist because they're creeped out by them. And the biggest problem a vampire has is having their name stolen and kind of being cursed to become like a murderous vampire. And there's lots of, you know, cool like twists and who's of who's secretly a vampire and who is cursing the vampires to become evil and all that stuff. But the fight scenes are great because one of the characters, I won't spoil who, but one of the characters is a normal human. One of the characters is a vampire. And of course, a vampire has super strength and super speed. So the normal human is just sort of a lunatic who has a lot of balls and throws himself into these situations and just barely gets out of it. So it's great. They're great complements. One of them brings sort of like this great physical, supernatural abilities to it, and the other brings this sort of sheer grit and determination. The vampire scenes, I think, they're scary. I want to show it. I'll spoil a little bit. So this girl who seems like a completely sweet girl turns out to be a vampire, and she just sort of freaks out. And it's like, I don't know if it was blood or just like a lot of action lines, but it legitimately scared me. And the back and forth between Vanitas, the Holmes-like character, and Noah, the Watson-like character. It's really charming. It's really blunt, and I think it's exactly the right sort of character dynamic to add to the let's go hunt for vampires and save them from being cursed by the evil dude vibe it's got. Now, I mentioned that the art is the reason I recommended this because it's like really clean. It's very different from Mushishi. Mushishi was very loose and expressive. This is very tight, very clean work, but it adds details to exactly the right things. So, you know, a quick fight scene, lots of action lines and punches and, you know, sound effects typical of manga, but then later they'll show like these massive details and massive ships to create the feel of the steampunk world, or they'll show like historical details to give it that nice old school flair, or if they're in the back alley fighting a vampire, it'll be really rich and dark and black. Excellent use of black for that emotional effect in certain scenes. This is the one I was thinking of, where she's sort of, the poor girl's becoming like a mad vampire and her name's been stolen, and there's like this real, it's similar to Mushishi in that it's got this really primal fear to it, but it's a different kind of primal fear. It's a primal fear in the context of an action story where it's getting me, you know, all hopped up to see them fighting each other and kicking butt. but it's not exactly that same, like, you know, quiet, creepy ghost story. This is more like big, scary action story, and I think that's all I'm going to show. I'm going to return to the case study of Vanitas since it is a highest recommendation. Don't want to go over 20 minutes, but if you love Full Metal Alchemist, check it out. If you love vampire stories, check it out. And if you don't like, you know, super duper gory, bloody stories, there's a little blood in, you know, there's a little blood in it. They're vampires, but I think it does a good job of using vampires in a fun, interesting action story without beating you over the head with it. So Jun Mochizuki and Mushishi, 2 highest recommendations. Thus ends the final iPhone video on #1 Marmaduke Fan. Do, by all means, check out #1 Marmaduke Fan Uncut, and do subscribe to it. Even if you just like my Deltarune content, please subscribe to #1 Marmaduke Fan Uncut, because I think you'll really appreciate some of my thoughts on art history, you know, how to tell a good story. I really want... there's going to be a slightly different vibe to the 2 channels, and there might be, like, more triggering content and controversial issues on #1 Marmaduke Fan Uncut, but I really hope that if you want to hear my opinion on the arts and why I think some art is good, then I think you'll appreciate what I'm doing on #1 Marmaduke Fan Uncut. With that, I am #1 Marmaduke Fan. I love you guys, and I will catch you later.